I stumbled upon the haunted legacy of the Bellamy Dynasty and their terrifying secret cult. I never should have opened that door. I was just an average kid, you know. Waking up, stumbling through school, hanging with friends. But one evening, curiosity led me to that old mansion at the end of our street. They said it was cursed. They said the Bellamy family summoned dark spirits. The whispers had always tugged at the edge of my mind. That night, something inside me snapped. I had to explore. The moment I crossed the threshold, chill ran down my spine. The air thickened around me, heavy with the smell of decaying wood and something else, something metallic. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around me like a creeping shadow. Faint whispers flickered through the air, a ghostly choir chanting secrets I wasn't meant to hear. My heart raced. I could almost feel the walls breathing, and then it happened. A crash echoed from the hallway. I froze. The sound was like shattering glass. My chest tightened, and a lump rose in my throat. I wanted to bolt. To scream, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt a presence lurking, watching from the corners. Shadows twisted, stretching into grotesque shapes. The temperature dropped, biting at my skin. I inched forward, not knowing why. A flicker of movement caught my eye. There, in the dim light, shapes flitted past. Just a draft? A figment of my imagination? No. It felt too real. I could hear my own breathing, shaky and fast, filling the suffocating silence. Each step I took echoed against the empty walls, teasing whatever was waiting for me. Then it got weirder. Objects began to shift. A dusty chair tilted. A book fell from the shelf, opening to a page covered in strange symbols. My skin crawled. I could feel tingles of dread coursing through my veins. What is happening? I whispered to no one in particular. The whispers grew louder, almost chanting now, drowning out my thoughts. My pulse roared in my ears that I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Just shadows dancing at the edges. But the feeling, that sense of being hunted, lingered. I turned back, barely breathing now. A sudden gust blasted through the room, slamming the door behind me. I jumped. A cold wave of panic washed over me. I was trapped. Something dark shifted in the corner of my eye. My breath hitched. A figure loomed, shrouded in the gloom, slowly stepping forward. In that instant, fear consumed me. I opened my mouth to scream. But then everything went black. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I awoke on the cold, wooden floor, my body aching as if I had been thrown against the wall. The darkness was oppressive, almost tangible, wrapping around me like a shroud. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but my limbs felt heavy, as if they were daubed with lead. A low hum lingered in the air, vibrating through the floorboards, an unsettling chorus that seemed to originate from deep within the heart of the mansion. As I gathered my senses, I pushed myself up and surveyed my surroundings. The room was dimly illuminated by a half-shattered window, moonlight bleeding through the jagged glass and casting long, skeletal shadows. The whispers had faded, but a chilling draft continued to swirl around me, carrying with it the faint scent of something sweet and rotten. Forcing myself to my feet, I realized I was not alone. The walls seemed to pulse, the very fabric of the house shifting and throbbing with an unspoken horror. A low creaking echoed from the entrance of the room, clawing at the edge of my sanity. I turned to face it, heart racing. The air thickened, and the once faint whispers returned, this time distinct and anguished-like voices trapped in a never-ending cycle of despair. "Leave, before it's too late," they murmured, weaving through the air, wrapping themselves around each syllable until their meaning morphed into a chilling urgency. No sooner had I registered the warning when the ground beneath me began to tremble. I stumbled, clawing for balance as the floorboards shifted ominously. I needed to get out, to escape this nightmare, but the entrance seemed to darken, a void swallowing the light. I felt trapped not just in this room, but in the very essence of the mansion itself. In a panic, I scanned the room for another way out. My eyes fell on the book that had fallen earlier, its pages flapping wildly as though stirring from slumber. Despite my better judgment, I took a hesitant step toward it. As I grasped the weathered cover, icy fingers wrapped around my wrist, cold and unyielding. I yanked back, breathless, but it persisted, pulling me forward. I could now see the symbol scrawled across its open pages, a tangled, chaotic language that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Just then, a guttural sound erupted from the shadows, a distorted laughter, echoing through the walls, filling my chest with dread. I glanced back, and everything shifted. No longer merely shadows, they had formed shapes, twisted, gnarled forms twisting in ways they should not. Dark eyes glimmered within the depths of their outlines, staring, hungry. The book began to vibrate, and I felt warmth pooling in my palm as if the pages were reacting to whatever horror was surfacing behind me. Then, in the unnatural silence that followed, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. "I see you," a voice whispered from the dark. It was smooth yet thick with malice, flooding my veins with ice. "You've opened a door, you've unlocked what should have remained buried." My heart thundered. I forced myself to look back into the depths of the shadows, where the figure was now distinctly visibly a silhouette contorted in agony, a mouth twisted into an eternal scream. Just as I tried to back away, the shadows warped and writhed, merging into a horde that surged toward me, arms reaching, desperate to drag me into their darkness. I threw the book away and turned to flee, but as I moved, the floor beneath me boiled and warped, pulling me into its grasp. I was sinking, the wooden planks acting like a living entity. Panic surged within me as I fought against the pull, my body succumbing to the growing void. "Stay with us, little one," the voice cooed, sweet like poison. "Well, show you the truth." With every ounce of strength I had left, I tore myself free from the miasma of shadows. I sprinted towards the door, my only hope. Just as I reached it, an ethereal hand shot out, catching my ankle, dragging me down. With one final scream echoing through the malevolent mansion, I felt myself being pulled into the darkness. Unseen forces wrestled against me as I clawed for freedom, for light, for a way out. And as my fingertips brushed the doorframe, everything exploded into a blinding white light, and I was enveloped in a cacophony of torment. Then silence. The white light faded. I found myself suspended in a vast, crimson abyss, surrounded by ghastly faces, memories that were not mine. My heart raced as I realized I had crossed some invisible threshold, plunging deeper into the horrors than I could have ever imagined. And above me, a chilling chant recurred, reverberating through the darkness. "Welcome, sister, to the Bellamy's embrace." And with that, the abyss began to pull me down. The blood-red void seemed endless, alive with shadows that twisted and coiled around me like serpents eager for their prey. Faces crowded into focus, mouths moving in silent screams, wide eyes filled with anguish that told tales of despair far beyond my understanding. I felt their pain teetering on the edge of my consciousness, merging with my own terror. This wasn't just a dream, this was a confession of forgotten horrors that echoed the grim legacy of the Bellamy family. Gravity shifted, and suddenly I was hurtling downward, caught in a maelstrom of whispers that rose and fell like the tide. "Sister, sister." They cooed, each syllable simultaneously soothing and grotesque, an invocation of ancient affliction. I was drawn deeper into the crimson maw, the air thick with the scent of decay, and I felt the walls of this distorted realm pulse with each heartbeat of the damnation that surrounded me. As I fell, an unseen force cupped my body, and I spiraled downwards until I landed hard on a cold stone floor. Blinking against the dimness that encased me, my surroundings crystallized into a chamber, circular and vast, hewn from blood-colored stone that felt warm and slick beneath my fingers. The floor was engraved with the same chaotic runes I had glimpsed in the Buka language that throbbed with a rhythm of its own. They pulsed like a heartbeat, echoing with the whispers of the souls entwined in the Bellamy lineage. Silhouettes danced across the walls, their movements fluid yet unsettling, as if they remembered life only in fleeting glimpses. A chill ran down my spine. I was not meant to be here. I was an interloper in a sacred space steeped in the grotesque history of a family that had steeped itself in the occult. The Bellamys had embraced something far darker than mere kinship. Suddenly, a low bell began to toll, each reverberation washing over me in waves of foreboding. The sound navigated through the chamber like a living thing, and as it echoed, shadows began to converge, coiling around one another until they formed a figure, a woman draped in dark, flowing robes, her face partially obscured by the hood that framed her expressionless countenance. "Welcome, child," she intoned, her voice like gravel. "You have heeded the call of the Bellamy legacy. You are one of us now, whether by blood or fate." That I opened my mouth to protest, to lash out at the absurdity of her words, but no sound came. A sudden, stinging pain lanced through my leg, and I glanced down to find delicate tendrils of shadow wrapping around my ankles, anchoring me in place. The icy embrace sent waves of terror through me as I struggled against their grasp, but the more I fought, the tighter they bound. "You must understand," the woman continued, her eyes glinting like obsidian in the dim light, "to inherit the truth of the Bellamys, one must confront the past. We are bound to secrets that echo through time, cages of our own making." With a wave of her hand, the walls began to shimmer and dissolve, revealing glimpses of the mansion above it, once full of life and suffocating in its stillness. I could see shadows flitting through rooms, caught in moments of twisted revelry, their laughter a macabre symphony. A grim banquet played out before me, with figures grotesquely feasting in the halls, their eyes vacant yet hungry. Glances exchanged concluded in gestures that spoke of blood rituals and pacts woven under the shroud of night. Feeling the darkness close in, I cried out, "I don't belong here. Am not one of you." But my words faltered. The shadows writhed with twisted glee, their desires intertwining with mine, forcing the truth I dared not utter from the depths of my forgotten memory, a lineage long buried and now clawing its way to the surface. And then, as if the answer to my plea, the shadows shifted again to reveal a man standing at the head of the banquet table, regal yet monstrous, surrounded by feasting figures. With wide, soulless eyes, he seemed to gaze directly at me, a flicker of recognition igniting a terror within. An overpowering sense of familiarity washed over me as he opened his mouth, and in that moment, the entire chamber shuddered. "Family brings curse and salvation." His voice echoed like thunder, causing the walls to vibrate with ferocity. "You come from a line steeped in the blood of our ancestors. You know nothing of the legacy you carry, but you must embrace it." A flood of memories surged through the shadows around me, as if the curtain of time had been pulled back. I saw glimpses of living moments, sacrifices, oaths, rituals of binding that echoed with the same names that haunted my nights, names I had dismissed as mere family lore. The curse flowed through my veins as I understood that I could not escape this fate. I was entangled in a web spun of secrets. As the gruesome truth settled in my mind, the woman raised her hands, and the shadows chanted in unison, drowning out my thoughts. "Join us!" they cried, pulling in all directions, clawing at my consciousness. Just then, with a palpable jolt, the crimson realm began to fracture, revealing a mirror portal swirling with a corrupted light. No. I screamed, the shadow tendrils tightening around me, pulling me back into the depths of despair. But as I struggled, the portal beckoned, a fierce light promising freedom or damnation. I couldn't decipher its intent, but the choice loomed before me, bright and terrible, just as the darkness closed in one last time, and the woman's voice commanded from the void, "Choose wisely, sister." The shadows exploded, and all went black. In that deafening silence, I felt the ground shift beneath me, and a voice echoed from beyond, tender yet chilling, "There is no escape from the family's grasp." And then the ground opened wide, sucking me into an abyss of endless night, leaving me hanging on the precipice of fate, teetering between life and the legacy that awaited me. The void swallowed me whole, surrendering to an emptiness that felt like an eternal fall without breath or sensation. Time lost its meaning, and within this abyss of shadows, I found my thoughts swirling in unending circles. Memories and fears clashed like titans, forming grotesque phantoms that hovered at the edge of my consciousness, taunting me with their twisted visages. Somewhere in the darkness, a familiar voice echoed like flint struck against steel. "You'll remember us, sister, you'll remember." I plunged deeper, a vortex of faces rising to greet me, each more horrific than the last. They bore expressions of agony and despair, etched into their skin like a map leading to forgotten horrors. They reached out to me, their skeletal hands grasping at my sanity, twisting my sense of self. My heart pounded in my chest as I fought to remember the warmth of solid ground, the comforting embrace of light. But it was as if I was being drained of everything that defined me. Suddenly, the descent ended, and I collided with a hard surface, gasping for air. I shrank back, attempting to gather my thoughts, but my surroundings were a treacherous haze. Disoriented, I stood in a dimly lit corridor, flanked by walls adorned with grotesque portraits of the Bellamy family through the ages. Each gaze followed me with vacant hunger, their eyes flickering like dying embers in the gloom. The air thickened with an acrid scent, like something long dead, and that familiar voice surfaced again, whispering around me, infiltrating the very marrow of my bones. "Welcome home, sister. You must choose before the blood moon rises." Heart racing, I stumbled down the corridor, battling the fear clawing at my throat. Every portrait felt alive, their painted smiles stretching into grimaces that mocked my terror. And then, as if beckoned by an unseen force, I was drawn toward an archway at the hall's end, a grotesque threshold covered in the same runes I had seen before, glinting in crimson hues that seemed to pulse with life. Beyond the arch, a grand salon sprawled before me, illuminated by flickering candles that cast erratic shadows over an elaborately set table. The atmosphere vibrated with an electric tension, as laughter echoed from unseen guests, gleeful yet suffocating. I hesitated, my heart hammering, as the terrifying realization slowly dawned on me. The banquet I had glimpsed before was not merely a vision, it was a reality, and it was drawing near. Caught in a web of dread, I stepped forward. A low hum resonated from the shadows pooling around the table, an invocation that made the hairs on my arms rise. Faces appeared out of the darkness, revealing a congregation of the Bellamy ancestors, their eyes eerily wide with expectation. They were dressed in garments that flowed like liquid night, and their hands danced over the tabletop, playing a symphony of the haunted. "Join us, dear sister." They beckoned in unison, voices harmonizing into a chilling lullaby. "Embrace your rightful place among us." Suddenly, the room began to warp and twist, the walls spinning into a dizzying dance that left me rooted to the spot. The mirth of the banquet transformed into something grotesque, as families merged into one gory amalgamation, arguing over half-eaten limbs and bloody sacrifices. There was a sinister joy in their gory antics, a thirst for something unnameable. The laughter morphed into howls, piercing through my resolve. "You must choose." The voice rang out again, laced with desperation and hunger. "The blood moon rises, and with it, the time to decide your fate." In that suffocating moment, an icy hand gripped my ankle from underneath the table, pulling me down toward the chaos. The laughter stalked me now, echoing in my skull, drowning all remaining logic. I fought against the grip with all my strength, but the laughter grew more shrill, as if they craved my terror, feasting on my resistance. A vision stabbed through the chaos. Me mother, a shimmering silhouette ablaze with memories, her pained expression clear in the din. "You must remember, child. Do not let them take you. The legacy is a curse." That warning ignited a flicker of defiance deep within me. I wrenched my foot free, tumbling backward, breathless, away from the throngs of phantoms. "No!" I shouted, as if my voice could pierce the veil of horror surrounding me. "I am not one of you." But as I stumbled back, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man adorned in regal mastery, reminiscent of the banquet figure I had seen before. His face twisted into a cruel semblance of familiarity, a smile curling his lips. With the authority of an ancient ruler, he stepped forward, and I knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that he was my past and, perhaps, my future. "Choose now," he intoned, a tempest of dread swirling in his gaze. "The blood moon waits for no one. Join us or become one of the damned. Before I could respond, ethereal tendrils shot from the shadows, grasping at my limbs, the room collapsing into chaos as every face in the banquet hall turned toward me in ravenous hunger, their mouths opening wide in voiceless screams. In that instant of horror, I grasped the weight of the choice I had to make. But the shadows closed in, their desires infiltrating my mind, breeding confusion and fear. With one breath, I had to define my fate, but as the darkness gripped me tighter, I was left with only a chilling thought reverberating through the air. Perhaps the choice had never been mine to begin with, and with that final, harrowing whisper echoing, everything collapsed into a void darker than before, holding me captive in its insatiable embrace. In the suffocating blackness, a new reality began to form around me, the sensation of falling replaced by an unsettling, gliding motion. I felt fingers of icy mist slither along my skin, brushing against my cheek, taunting me with the lingering remnants of fear. My heart thudded madly in my chest, the echoes of the past still reverberating within my mind, binding me to the horror I'd just experienced. Suddenly, with a violent lurch, I crashed onto solid ground. Breathless, I blinked into a dimly lit chamber, the air laced with the metallic tang of blood and the murmur of hushed voices curling around the dank walls. My pulse raced as I struggled to regain my bearings. The oppressive darkness coiled tightly around me, but dim flickers of candlelight bled through the cracks, illuminating a circle of figures huddled at the chamber's center. These were no ordinary specters. Clad in tattered robes, their bodies glimmered as if adorned with shadows, their faces obscured behind grim masks of ravenous delight. They whispered incantations, their words wrapping around me like a noose, binding me to their ritualistic fervor. An unseen force yanked at my core, pulling me closer, as if the very walls of the chamber were urging me into their vortex of despair. An altar rose from the ground in the center, its crimson surface smeared with dark stains that reminded me all too vividly of what I had just witnessed. As I approached, the figures halted, their attention locking upon me with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. It felt as though their hollow eyes were seeking something in mesothing they desired for their dark communion. One figure stepped forward, lifting its mask with slender, bony fingers. The sight sent bile crawling up my throat. A face so contorted, it seemed to have been sculpted from despair itself. "The blood moon grants us a gift," the figure rasped, voice dripping like poison. "The gift of renewal, through sacrifice." Every part of my body screamed for escape, but the shadows twisted tighter, ensnaring my will. The ritualistic chant began to crescendo, flooding my ears with the sonorous echoes of renewal and sacrifice. With desperate adrenaline surging through my veins, I struggled against the weight of their collective gaze, feeling the gravity of their hunger pulling at my very soul. "Choose." A chorus of voices rang out, fused together in an ominous melody. "Will you embrace our legacy? Will you relinquish the last fragments of yourself for salvation?" Salvation. The word ricocheted in my mind, but nothing felt redeeming about this accursed gathering. Images of my family flashed before me, my mother's tears, my father's tortured screams, my siblings' hollow laughter echoing in the void, each tainted by the same haunting legacy I now writhed in. I opened my mouth to scream but found the words frozen on my tongue, entangled with terror. Then, in that frantic moment of paralyzing fear, another voice broke through the excruciating echo, familiar and tender. "Run, Sarah. They won't let you remember." It was her. A flicker of warmth amidst the encroaching darkness. The figure that had haunted my dreams, my long-lost sister, suddenly appeared, her silhouette radiant yet wrapped in shadow. As she reached out to me, the room convulsed with anger, the masked figures lunging forward, their wiry limbs reaching for my sister. I felt a surge of instinct, a primal urge to protect her. "No!" I shouted, breaking through the chilling chant as I lunged forward, knocking into the spectral form of my sister. But the moment I touched her, a blinding light burst forth from our connection, forcing the figures back, their ghastly murmurs twisting into wails of fury. The walls trembled as fragments of the chamber began to splinter. I grasped her hand, tears forming as I felt the warmth of her presence, a beacon amidst the consuming darkness. "Together," she gasped, her voice a fragile thread of hope. "We can break the cycle." But just as I felt the rush of power emanating from our entwined hands, the ground trembled violently beneath us, fissures opening and swallowing. The shadows whole. The chamber began to cave in, the figures screeching, the very foundation of the Bellamy legacy visibly fracturing before my eyes. Remember us. They howled, reaching out with skeletal fingers, but their cries faded into the echoes of the collapsing void. As a blinding flash enveloped us, I was plunged again into darkness, but not without catching the last sight of my sister's panicked expression, forever frozen in time, a haunting reminder of the choice I had yet to make. Then, amidst the swirling chaos, the abyss opened its yawning maw once more, the foreboding echo of familiar laughter cascading into an eager whisper that promised to unveil the hidden horrors that lay ahead, wrapping around my senses with malevolent delight. You cannot outrun your fate, sister. You will join us, and I will find you. With that chilling reminder, I was swallowed back into the void, the walls of despair pressing in as I braced for the unknown horrors that awaited, a depth of terror deeper than the last, where the shadows themselves breathed my name. The darkness returned with a viscous fluidity, wrapping me in a suffocating shroud. It was a deeper darkness, one that whispered unspeakable horrors directly into the marrow of my bones. I felt it tear at me, digging into the recesses of my mind, forcing me to relive the spectral horrors that had previously plagued me. Each breath was a gasp fraught with trepidation, charged with anticipation of what lay ahead in the encroaching void, but there was something else, the unmistakable sensation of movement. Not just my own, but an unsettling proximity that twisted my gut into knots. I strained to discern any physical outline surrounding me, but the darkness betrayed me, refusing to yield even the smallest hint of illumination. Then came the dry, scuttling sound, a chorus of chitinous legs clicking rhythmically just beyond my reach. Help us, came a disembodied voice, sorrowful and fractured, echoing through the suffocating silence. It was a plea, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. I froze, dread sweeping through me, as the echoes unfurled, hundreds, perhaps thousands, of voices melding together in a ghastly symphony of anguish. The dissonant whispers clawed at my sanity, pulling me deeper into a labyrinth of despair that I forced myself to move, dragging my feet as though bound in chains, each step met with the overwhelming sensation of countless eyes unseen yet felt watching in silent judgment. I stumbled onward, endlessly searching for an escape, but the shadows merely shifted, greeting me with an eerie, expectant stillness. It felt as if I was being led into a hellish waltz. The shadows, my unwilling partners, join us. Be one with the dark, the voices chanted, rhythmic and seductive, pulling at the threads of my resolve. My pulse quickened, dread flooding my veins. A chilling realization struck me: these were not just the lost souls of the Bellamy legacy. They were the remnants of countless sacrifices rendered in blood, manipulated and tortured for this insatiable hunger for devotion. Something scraped behind me, an invitation, a lure, or a predator lying in wait? I turned with a jolt, searching the oppressive void, yet the noise receded, blending into the cacophony of despair. But I was not alone. A silhouette loomed, born from the very darkness surrounding me. It bore shapes and features that were glimmers of once familiar faces that morphed into a gruesome display of agony and ambition, my kin now grotesquely contorted in their efforts to draw me into this cursed existence. Panic surged as I staggered back, colliding with something cold and slick, the texture foreign and palpably foul. I recoiled, reacting instinctively. It was flesh, corrupt and writhing, crawling beneath the weight of an unseen force. "Help us, Sarah," they insisted, shrieking in unison. We were betrayed for a lie. Their cries were heart-wrenching, reverberating against the walls of my mind. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the pulsing mass, sensing their desperate energy coursing through the slimy surface. But their accursed legacy was a binding chain, one that threatened to drag me down into the depths of their despair. Amidst this chaotic whirlpool, I caught glimpses of faces I had almost forgotten, the familiar features of my mother, twisted in anguish, my father with hollow eyes pleading for forgiveness. My chest constricted, grief combining with rage. "What happened to you?" I screamed, but they only howled in reply, a cacophony of voices drowning each other out. That I forced my way through the writhing mass, an instinctive need to escape clawing at my heart. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted as if summoned by my turmoil. A spiral staircase coiled before me, made of bolted iron, descending further into the murky unknown. The air grew colder, thick with tangible dread, yet an unseen force drove me toward it. Before I could fully comprehend my choice, my feet moved, led by the whispers that plucked at my soul the promise of enlightenment and freedom hidden in the spirals below. The shadows clung to me, a velvety mist wrapping around my legs like a serpent seeking to ensnare its prey. As I descended, the murmurs faded, replaced by chilling laughter, a baritone so familiar yet so alien. It echoed through the cramped tunnel, filling me with a foreboding certainty. The walls began to pulse and shudder as if responding to a heartbeat of their own. I pressed onward, heart racing with a potent blend of terror and intrigue, until, at last, I reached the bottom, where a heavy door loomed before me, engraved with symbols that twisted and writhed, alive with a purpose carved in an ancient tongue. The shadows converged, a lush sea of darkness promising secrets lost to time. With trembling hands, I reached for the handle. Just as I turned it, the laughter exploded into a frenzy, crescendoing violently, overwhelming me like a dark tide. The door swung open, revealing a blinding light that illuminated the faces of those revealed in the glow, still stitched together with a Bellamy family, my sacrifices, entwined in the fabric of an unimaginable horror. "Welcome back, sister, it's time to decide," they chorused, their bodies contorting into grotesque shapes, suspended between ecstasy and torment, the light flickering ominously as the shadows surged around me, desperate to drag me into the heart of their legacy. And as the door creaked wider, behind it, something stirred, a presence, stirring awake from centuries of slumber, and my entire world unraveled. "You are the final piece, join us, and the cycle shall continue." With the weight of 1,000 eyes upon me, I stood on the precipice of a choice that could unhinge not only my fate but the fates of all entwined in this wretched lineage. As the last echo of the sinister laughter dissipated, the oppressive silence that followed hung heavily in the air, suffocating my thoughts and choking my breath. The glow from the open door cast phantoms of light and shadow across the chamber, and for a moment, I found a flicker of clarity amidst the chaos. My fingers trembled around the handle, a grotesque connection binding me to the tortured faces of my family, mere inches away. "What decision?" I whispered, my voice quaking, barely a breath against their haunting gaze. "What cycle?" The question hung there, swallowed by the darkness that encircled us like a vengeful beast, amassing its strength to pounce. They stepped forward, the flickering light illuminating their warped forms in grotesque detail. My mother reached out, her fingers elongated and claw-like, the skin stretched taut over her bones. "You think you are here to escape, Sarah, but you were born for this," she said, sensual sadness dripping from her words. "All our pain, our suffering, it is a gift to be shared." A bluish haze began to pool beneath my feet, a liquid darkness that writhed and shimmered with a life of its own. It slithered past me, lapping at the edges of the door. My family shifted, no longer just fixed expressions of anguish, but dynamic shadows, embodiments of terror that beckoned me toward the precipice. A terrible sense of urgency filled the air, and the voices swelled again, echoing off unseen walls. "Join us," they urged, their chants melding, an incantation buried deep in the resonance of the air. The glow around them pulsed in rhythm with the chant, throbbing like a heart, as if the very fabric of the room was imbued with their yearning. With dread pooling in my stomach, I felt a tugging sensation seeping through the cracks of my mind, a terrifying beckoning that felt both like a promise and a curse. But at what cost? The question burst forth unbidden, a plea for reasoning amidst the insanity. The laughter roared back to life, more guttural and insatiable than before. "You are the cost, dear sister." My father's decayed visage snarled, his voice layered with an unearthly resonance. "Your essence shall seal our covenant, the final sacrifice to awaken the legacy of the Bellamy Dynasty." As they spoke, the bluish liquid thickened, encircling my ankles and climbing upward, crawling up my shins like 1,000 clammy fingers clenching tighter, attempting to draw me into their depths. Panic clawed at my throat, an instinctive desire to flee surging within me. I stumbled back, my heart hammering like a funeral drum, yet the door loomed, an ominous portal demanding entry. "I won't let this happen," I shouted, my voice imbued with a desperate clarity, as I forced myself to step back. The shadows shivered at my denial, their eyes blazing, each a flicker of pure malice. The figures contorted in response, losing their semblance of humanity, morphing into horrific visages of merged flesh and desperation. Suddenly, a loud crack split the chamber as the floor trembled. The shadows shrieked, the reverberation of their cries merging into one towering wave that enveloped me. My instincts ignited into a flood of adrenaline. Ignoring the swirling darkness clenching at my feet, I dashed towards the staircase I had descended, hoping to escape the monstrosity towering above, but just as I turned, the shadows surged forward, their forms shifting faster than I could react, flooding backward to intercept my path. I was trapped, surrounded by the faces of my familiar manifestation of the very horrors they had suffered, willing to ensnare me further into their web of despair. In that moment, a flash of movement caught my eye from behind them. A silhouette stood shrouded in the depths of the light, rising above the fray. It was an outline all too familiar, draped in memory and anguish. I breathed, recognition slicing through the haze of fear. It was the figure of my sibling, lost for years, assumed dead spirits entwined around them, feeding off the chaos. Their expression was a haunting blend of rage and pleading, a silent message. Tearing through the tumult, "Save yourself, Sarah. Run." Their voice pierced the veil of cacophony, laden with urgency, but just beyond them, the shadows groaned heavily, closing in like a tide about to swallow a drowning soul. Caught in a frenzied storm of bewilderment and horror, I felt my resolve falter. The shadows writhed, hungry and agitated at my hesitation. The air thickened, echoes of my family concocting a twisted harmony around me, each note a physical weight balled against my chest. Suddenly, as if the darkness had grown fed up with my turmoil, it lunged forward, a wave of viscous black rushing to smother me in its depths. And all at once, the chamber split apart, a fissure running down the wall as all-consumed shadows seemed to draw power from the chaos around us. The light flickered and died, and an explosion of voices erupted, drowning out my screams, and just before I was swallowed by the dark abyss, I caught a glimpse of my siblings' forlorn eyes, reflection of the impending sacrifice that would rip apart everything I ever knew. Then the world went dark. When consciousness returned, I found myself lying on a cold, hard surface that felt foreign beneath my skin. Faint whispers lingered in the air, weaving around me like a noose, barely decipherable yet oddly familiar. I forced my eyelids apart, the effort draining, and focused on my surroundings. The room was dimly illuminated by an ethereal glow, vibrant yet sickly, casting distorted shapes that slithered along the walls. "Sarah," a voice like rusted metal slid through the haze, rebounding off the space in a twisted echo. Heart racing, I sat up slowly, my body crying out against the chill that nipped at my bones. I was in a vast cavern, more expansive than I had ever dreamt, a hollow womb resonating with life both ancient and perverse. The walls pulsated, veins of the earth pumping eerie light down between the cracks, and the air around me was thick, as if each breath carried a weight of unspoken fear. Something crunched beneath my fingertips. I looked down to see bone fragments, their starkness contrasting with the shadows looming around me. I recoiled, catching a glimpse of the shadows moving beyond the periphery of my vision. Shapes fluctuated, like dark gusts of wind swirling around a grave. Panic pulsed through me, electrifying every nerve. Sudden movement to my left raised the hairs at the nape of my neck. I turned, heart pounding as I scanned the darkness. That's when I saw them, the writhing forms of my family, their faces even more contorted by the unfathomable darkness that surrounded us. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural luminescence, each one fixed on me with a mix of hunger and despair. "Welcome back, Sarah," my mother's voice cooed, a romantic undertone dripping from her wasted lips. "You have much to learn, dear child of the Bellamy legacy." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the jagged remains scattered across the ground. "What is this place?" I demanded, feeling the panic swell like a dark tide threatening to pull me under. "What do you want from me?" "Everything you see is a part of your memories, our pain, all the injustice inflicted upon the Bellamy name must live on through you," my father replied, his voice reverberating with a sickly resonance. "You are the vessel, the final catalyst for our resurrection." The walls trembled again, a rumbling shudder that echoed through the cavern. I felt it vibrating in my bones, a prelude to the impending dread. Resurrection? I whispered. From what? From whom? A shiver rolled through the darkness as if the very shadows recoiled at my question. The air thickened, and the phantoms shifted closer, but their eyes glimmered, filled with malicious promise, as if they had been waiting for my inquiry. From what you are afraid of, Sarah, my sister's voice wove into the chaos, her figure appearing beside my mother, yet flickering like a dying flame. Her face was gaunt, eyes hollow, but a trace of the past lingered in her glare, a reminder of the childhood joy now swallowed by desolation. You must face it to be reborn. The fears that live in your heart, the darkness that haunts you, we will show you. Why should I trust you? I sank to my knees, terror interweaving with numbness as despair echoed around me. You are all twisted. You are not my family. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward in a tidal wave, locking me in place, enshrouding me in darkness with the rancid scent of decay. A chorus of moans erupted, the anguished cries of 1,000 lost souls resonating, and I covered my ears, but it was too late. The voices of my family chimed among them, and I could feel the familiar grasping of their fingers, pulling me toward the gaping mouth of the abyss. Accept your destiny. My mother screamed, her features morphing into a monstrous visage, jagged teeth glinting in the dim light. Join us or suffer the consequences, and before I could respond, the shadows twisted, forming a portal that darkened deeper than the night itself, swallowing everything, an invitation laced with malice. I was thrust forward, helpless against the tide of anguish. Time fractured. Images flashed dangerously in front of Mimi. Childhood games, whispering threats that lingered, eerie laughter that blended into a nightmarish symphony. My heart clenched as phantoms coalesced around me, taunting silhouettes of failures and regrets taking shape in the void. The world blurred, laughter rising to a deafening crescendo as I was pulled closer to the core of darkness. And just when I thought I would be consumed by the void, I felt a sudden jolt, an intense sadness rippling through me as the darkness parted. There, suspended in the heart of that chasm, was a mirror surface reflecting not my own visage but the twisted, anguished faces of those I had lost. The specters murmured in concert, their mouths moving wordlessly, yet their eyes stole my breath. Choose, Sarah, the voice of my sibling echoed, distorted yet hauntingly familiar. Choose to either seal our fates together or free us from this torment. As my pulse thundered like an executioner's drum, the shadows swirled with impatient fury around me, each pulse drawing me closer to that dreadful mirror. The edges began to glow, burning bright with a promise of truth or a terrible deception, launched from a past I could never reconcile. In that critical moment, the realization hit me like a sledgehammer, a choice more grave than any I had anticipated, and then, as I reached out, the mirror shattered, splintering reality as it unveiled something far worse lurking behind a creature with a figure like mine, a monstrous reflection, its eyes glimmering with insanity and hunger. In that moment, before I could retract my hand or scream, it lunged. The mirror fragmented, shards cascading like glistening raindrops around me, very piece reflecting that nightmarish creature that shared my likeness, yet twisted into an abomination. Its eyes seethed with a voracious need, a darkness that gnawed at the corners of my mind. My breath quickened as time stretched, an eternity confined within those glistening edges. And then it lunged, the moment blurred, a whirlwind of chaos as that dark version of myself leapt forth, teeth bared in a snarl reminiscent of my own desperate maw. I twisted away, feeling the rush of cold air as it ripped past me, barely dodging its grasp. The ground beneath me trembled with an energy so malevolent, a palpable pulse that shook the very core of existence within this cavernous hell. Sarah, you cannot run from what you are. My father's voice thundered, the walls reverberating with primal fury. The shadows writhed around me, shaping into spectral hands that sought to grab hold of my limbs, pulling me back toward that wretched, splintered mirror. No! I screamed, the sound swallowed whole by the cavern. I could feel desperation clawing up my throat, suffocating me as I fought against the darkness. I bolted forward, not knowing where I was running or to whom I was fleeing, only that the horror of that creature was at my heels, relentless and insatiable. I rushed deeper into the cavern, glancing back to see it reforming with every stride I took. The tendrils of shadow then shifted, morphing into familiar shapes, figures of my family now distorted, their mouths stretching into unnatural grins that echoed with derision. They flanked the paths behind me, closing in, their laughter blending seamlessly with the unholy whispers, their voices a symphony of torment. Your blood runs deep, Sarah. It binds you to us. They beckoned, clawing through the darkness with fingers dipping into obscurity. I skidded to a halt, heart racing, the walls around me closing in, pulsating wildly as if the very stone was alive. The cavern breathed in tandem with my fear, an awareness thrumming in the air, a promise that I was not alone, that unseen eyes were watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. Dread brewed within, boiling over into a frantic resolve as I pressed forward, the need to escape overpowering the instinct to confront, drowning in terror. The outreaching shadows enveloped me, brushing against my skin with the chilling caress of forgotten dreams. Whispers morphed into screams, mingling with my family's cries, all pleading, urging mealways, guiding me deeper into their domain. As I stumbled through the darkness, I felt the pull of something vast. It thrummed through my blood like an ancient pulse, a bond stronger than fear. Each thud of my heart resonated like a war drum, beckoning me closer to something hidden. I cast a glance over my shoulder, dread coiling my insides. Me shadow self was still in pursuit, now multiplied, a savage army of my darkest impulses trailing behind. Suddenly, I found myself in a chamber, the cavern opening up like the maw of some great beast. The air was saturated with a putrid warmth, filling me with revulsion. Flickering torches cast warped shadows that danced on the walls, and at the center lay an altar, blackened with age and stained with remnants of offerings long forgotten. In the center of the altar sat an obsidian dagger, its blade shimmering menacingly under the lustrous light, beckoning to me with siren calls. The whispers bloomed again, seductive yet sinister, weaving through the air around me. This blade holds the key, Sarah. It can bind or shatter the curse. Take it, and you can set us free. Before I could process the gravity of their words, the dark ephemera of my family flared to life, reaching out, longing for the dagger's power. Their wide eyes glowed brighter, urging me forward. Join us, reclaim what is yours. Each heartbeat echoed louder, an ominous reminder of dread lancing through my core. Shadows swarmed around me, closing tighter, more insistent than ever. I could feel the prickle of their despair, but what would I lose upon claiming the dagger? Would I incite the weight of my family's past to crush me entirely? With a surge of determination battling against my mounting terror, I stepped forward, edging closer to the altar, the dagger's pull magnetic, a dark promise pooled in its glinting edge. What is it that I need to do? I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, but even as I reached for the hilt, a voice rang out, familiar yet distorted. No. You cannot allow it to consume you as it did us. It was my sister's voice, and something within it resonated deep, unearthed a fragment of hope within the tempest. My hand hesitated above the dagger, as an eruption of shadows surged around me, throwing myself back into the wall. I gasped, panic rising as the creature beneath their Urgisa, dark reflection of my very soul, rose through the tide, twirling around me, its form rippling in monstrous glee. You cannot defy your true self. Join me. It howled, fingers clawing at the seams of my mind. And then, the altar trembled violently beneath my feet as the shadows howled, a cacophony of sound that split the cavern like lightning. The very foundations of this forsaken domain were breaking down. In that moment of suspended horror, everything fell silent. The air shifted, charged with an unseen energy, and I felt a deep, resonating call envelop me. I was torn between the weight of my lineage and my desire to sever the ties of dread clinging to my spirit. With renewed vigor, I leaned closer, pain thrumming in my core, reaching for the dagger once more. But as my fingers grazed the hilt, a piercing scream echoed from somewhere deep within the shadows, and a pair of crimson eyes ignited in the darkness, fixing on me with a rage that crafted voids where hope once bloomed. Your choice will cost you more than you know. And before I could pull away, the chamber began to collapse around me, darkness closing in with a vengeance, pulling at my very essence, enfolding me in a suffocating shroud as I held on to the dagger, the last lifeline amid the thrashing storm. In that dawning moment of dread and revelation, as the walls caved in on all sides, I realized I might not only lose myself but awaken something that should never return. The shadows encircled me, but my choice remained tethered to the edge of chaos, and whatever lurked in the dark beyond was ready to strike. The weight of the darkness nestled in my chest grew heavier as I clutched the dagger, its cold metal sending tremors through my bones. The pulsating shadows swirled with feverish intensity, attempting to envelop me like a shroud of despair. I felt the dagger's power surge, whispering promises of liberation and torment, but could barely process my next moves as the deep undertones of anguish resonated within my veins. "Join us, Sarah. You are one of us." The voices of my family clung to me, heightened with desperation, melting into one cacophonous cry that demanded my allegiance. When I looked into their faces, I felt a flicker of recognition but also horror. They were the remnants of all that had been torn and twisted, shackled to this place. "Enough!" I screamed, and the cavern trembled with the force of my defiance. "I won't become you." With that declaration echoing in the depths, I sliced the air with the dagger, an act of desperation rather than conviction, yet it felt like my heart mirrored the movement. Darkness hissed, retreating slightly in response, drawing back like a tide from a shore. It realized I had struck at the foundation of our grotesque connection. But the shadows weren't easily cowed. Instead, they recoiled and then surged forward, more furious than before, as if seeking revenge against my defiance. "You cannot escape your birthright," my twisted sister's phantom hissed, her face contorted into a mask of rage and despair. The shadows sucked in their breath like a living entity, circling, narrowing their assault as if they were hungry wolves descending upon prey. In that moment of dire chaos, a surge of clarity broke forth within me. I harnessed the energy of the dagger pulsing between my fingertips, not merely a weapon, but a means to sever the bonds in this unreal horror. Yet a part of me understood a deeper truth: I was the darkness too. A visceral scream lanced through the air, unraveling my last traces of fear. "To break this curse, I must bind you." I lunged forward, slamming the dagger down, the blade plunging into the altar, blood soaking the stone like a dark sacrament in tune with ancient rites. The moment the blade made contact, the ground convulsed, shaking violently, disturbing the very fabric of the shadows. The shrieks of my family crescendoed, their contorted faces swirling around me in an agonizing symphony of torment. "No!" they cried, but the dagger's magic, ancient and powerful, intertwined with my blood, igniting the air in a blaze of light and horror. Shadows hissed and roared, boiling all around me as the cavern trembled, pushing me back as the overwhelming force of their collective suffering surged toward the dagger. I could feel the essence of the Bellamy legacy rising like smoke from their forms, clawing and grasping at me, desperate to draw me back into their abyss. That I steadied myself, focused on the light shining cruelly from the blade. I could hear Thema chorus of lost souls pleading for release, and I knew that to embrace this power, this truth, meant confronting not just their horrors, but my own. "You will not take me," I cried, forcing the memories of those I loved into the forefront of my mind, battling the darkness threatening to consume me. With a final, echoing gasp, a brilliant shockwave erupted from the dagger, engulfing the cavern. Visions of my past swirled around me, moments of joy, love, fragments of a time before the twisted rituals had chained me to this fate, flooding my heart with warmth that clawed at the grasping shadows, severing their ties. I blurred the outlines of the figures surrounding me, each face fading into ashen realms, reclaiming what was lost of freedom they had long denied. In a flash of understanding, I glimpsed the truth they had hidden. Their transformation into the very horrors I feared stemmed from the power of life I was meant to inherit. The shadows recoiled as I rose, the dagger erupting from the altar in brilliant flames, but then, something unexpected happened. Rising above the chaos, the original shadow that mirrored meth darkness I feared most began to break free from its confines. The creature, a reflection of my deepest fears, lunged forward, now retaining monstrous freedom. "Together, we are powerful," it shrieked, echoing through the unfolding light. I froze, the dagger suddenly trembling in my hand, a potent hesitation gripping my heart. A traumatic realization unfurled within me that I had become the source of the darkness, the final piece binding them all. In that moment, I understood, the curse would never die with me, it was only passed down, through my blood, my essence, and with each generation, the evils would remain until one dared to confront the inevitable. What have I done? I gasped, as the abyss itself screamed. Its shadows clawed at the space where I stood, recoiling from the dagger's light yet hungry for the returning power I could wield. Suddenly, an agonizing laugh erupted from the creature that was Might's eyes burning with both fury and longing. Now you see, sister, you are not the liberator. Before I could draw breath, it lunged again, aiming directly for the dagger, the light illuminating it like a pyre against the darkness. I retaliated instinctively, thrusting the weapon forward, but the darkness seeped from the very depths of my soul, entwining itself around the dagger, transforming it into something horrifyingly familiar. A mirror reflected back, my own face twisted, filled with the torment of countless lives that had come before. No! I gasped, horror clawing through me as I realized that not even this path would lead to a release. As shadows pressed in, consuming the space around me, the very walls groaned and shuddered as the echoing laughter of the Bellamys mingled with my own voice. Each chant punctured my senses like shards of glass, screams of desperation resonating against a cacophony of wails, an unbroken cycle tethered through betrayal and despair. And in that blinding moment of awareness, as everything spiraled into deafening chaos, my only thought remained: me fate was bound to this monstrous legacy, and the darkness would never truly disappear, ever. Sometimes to join the living is to allow the sinister hand of horror to pull you under, a truth lingering in the corners of every soul bound by eternal greed, envy, and the Bellamy legacy. With that unsettling thought seeping into every fiber of my being, the cavern began to whisper one last chilling reminder: welcome home, sister. Welcome home.